part of the purpose of writing this book was to correct misconceptions. People screw this up. Every movie that's ever been made about an asteroid impact has gotten something wrong. Deep Impact got most of it right. Their description of a comet, the way they landed. Have we all seen this movie? Anybody here not? Come on, not seen it? Oh, shame on you. Spoiler alert. So a comet's going to come and hit the Earth, and they blow it up, which is not really what you want to do. And I talk about that in this chapter. You don't want to blow this thing up, because that's not a very good way of getting rid of a comet. You basically want it not to hit. So, you know, if somebody's shooting a bullet at you, it doesn't help to split it in half and have the two pieces hit you, because you're still dead. The best thing to do is go, whee, or to deflect the bullet somehow if you're Angelina Jolie. And there are ways of doing that. But in the movies, they always try to blow them up. And imagine trying to blow up Mount Everest. Yeah, good luck with that. Have fun. It's hard to do. And in Deep Impact, but they try this, they blow it up. It turns out it splits into two pieces. One of them they have to let hit. This was awesome. This was not done in movies before, to have a giant impact shown in a movie, because it's really kind of depressing and scary. And it winds up being pretty much like I described here, a huge tidal wave expanding out, killing millions of people. If you watch that movie, that scene is extraordinarily well done and is probably really accurate. Although, if you watch it, there's a scene where they shoot it from New York, and there are a bunch of people sitting, like reading. There's a guy sitting on a bench reading a newspaper while this tsunami 500 feet high is about to sweep over, and I just wonder, you know, what's the headline say on his newspaper? You know, run! People would have evacuated the coast by then, I think. And they wind up detonating the second piece, which is this 5-mile chunk of comet. They blow it up, and then all the pieces burn up and it harmlessly in our atmosphere. And it's like, that's baloney. That wouldn't happen. The energy of impact depends on the mass of the object and the velocity it's moving. If you blow it up, you haven't changed its velocity. Everything's still coming in at the same speed. You haven't changed the mass. You've just made, you know, a billion little pieces instead of one big billion-sized piece. And so you're actually spreading the devastation over a bigger area, and you might be making things worse. So every movie tries to blow these things up, and it doesn't work that way. Armageddon... never mind. The movie Meteor did the same thing. They blew it up with nuclear weapons. This was the 1970s movie. You haven't seen it. It's actually... It's
Sean
awful.
Connery's in that, too.
Who is?
Sean Connery.
Oh, Sean Connery, Martin Landau, yeah. Brian Keith, Natalie Wood. It has a huge cast. And it struggles to be a great movie, and it struggles to be a crappy movie, and it can't quite hit either one. And so it's got these moments of brilliance when you're like, wow, where did that come from, considering a moment ago, you know, they're all, we have to destroy the meteor, you know, it's that sort of thing. But, you know, they blow it up with nuclear weapons, and over and over again they get misconceptions about this, and it really bugs me. And so that was one of the reasons I wrote this book. What kills me is they get it wrong in such ridiculous ways. In the beginning of Armageddon, Charlton Heston does a voiceover, and he says, the asteroid, I can't know if I can do a Charlton Heston, the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs was equivalent to 10,000 nuclear weapons. And it's like, no, it was equal to like 100 bazillion nuclear weapons. And the graphic they showed was all wrong and all this kind of stuff. I wanted to set the record straight, because they almost always underestimate how bad these things are. It's like, you're making a freaking disaster movie, and you're saying, oh, you know, it's like, what was The Day After, the one with the nuclear weapons blow up, and they're walking around Kansas. And Carl Sagan the next day wrote a review of it saying, yeah, what are they talking about? Everybody's dead. It's not like you're walking around losing your hair and going, oh, it's like, no, you're dead. So, you know, way to go, guys. You made it less scary than it really should have been. And it's like this over and over again in the book. I talk about the sun blowing out our power grid, the sun eventually frying the Earth when it swells up into a red giant. People get that wrong all the time. A nearby supernova, I was really surprised. I had to... Boy, did I research this. A supernova has to be really close to do significant damage to the Earth. The Milky Way galaxy is a disk 100,000 light years across. This is a huge number. A supernova, if it's more than even 100 light years away, 1,000th of the distance of the galaxy, would have to be closer than about 100 light years to do any damage. It really has to be close. And if it's going to do any really significant damage, it has to be a handful of light years away. The flip side of that is that there's an object called a gamma ray burst. Oh, gamma ray burst. I spent several years working on a NASA satellite that detects gamma ray bursts. It's up now, and I was doing education and public outreach for it. So I had to learn everything we knew about gamma ray bursts. And when I was writing the chapter, I'm writing this, and so here's what happens. You get a black hole, and it's under the star, and the star explodes, and then this, and this, and then I thought, the exact moment the black hole forms in the center of the exploding star, I didn't understand how this worked. How do you get the actual burst of gamma rays? And I don't know. And I looked in the journals, and I couldn't find anybody describing it. It's not the kind of thing they describe in the papers anyway. So I did what I always do. I called the head of the project. I called the big guy, the principal investigator of SWIFT, the satellite, and said, what happens in the few milliseconds after that black hole forms? And how do you get this gamma ray burst? And he said, yeah, nobody knows. Perfect. That makes it easier to write the chapter. Due to a witch's brew of magnetic and gravitational and frictional forces that are not completely understood, you get this. And at that point, I know what's going to happen. And you get this focused beam, a death ray of energy that just marches across the universe and makes these things visible to the naked eye from 5 billion light years away. And if one is, so these things are tremendous and terrifying. And I had a lot of fun. Fun is the right word. All the papers I read about this, people are interested in finding out how close does a gamma ray burst have to be to damage the Earth. Because the interesting thing is, when you do the statistics, you say, has there been one close enough to the Earth to do us damage, statistically speaking, over the 4 billion year history of the Earth? And the answer is yes. Over the 4 billion year history of the Earth, statistically speaking, there's 50-50 chance that we were caught in one gamma ray burst from a distance where it could damage us. And it turns out the Ordovician extinction 240 million years ago, that may not be right, when the trilobites were wiped out. There are indications, subtle and circumstantial, not conclusive, but it does seem to indicate that something came from the sky because deep sea creatures were unaffected, shallow water creatures died out, different plants were killed that were less sensitive to changes or were more sensitive to changes to UV. So the gamma ray burst may have wiped out our ozone layer or whatever was protecting these plants, and they died. You don't know, but it's like, we may have been caught in a gamma ray burst. And when you read that chapter, and I recommend that you do, it turns out the farthest they can be and still do physical damage to us is about 1,000 light years, or excuse me, about 8,000 light years. They can be pretty far away. 8,000 light years is a long way. I thought, well, that's fun. It'll lower our ozone layer and do this and do that, and it's interesting. Now, what happens if one were 100 light years away? Why not? Let's put one 100 light years away, and what would happen to the Earth? And I did all the math. And I said, how much energy would be deposited on the surface of the Earth compared to, say, how much sunlight heats the Earth up, which is a main source of energy on the Earth. And I did the numbers, and I got this number, and I looked at it, and I went, well, that's clearly not right. And I thought, that's clearly not right. And I did the calculation backwards. I started with that number, right, fed it into the equations backwards, and to calculate the distance, got 100 light years. And I thought, so a gamma ray burst 100 light years away is equivalent. Now imagine, right, here's the Earth, right, gamma ray bursts over here. Half the Earth is facing it, half is facing away. So over that half of the Earth that's facing the gamma ray burst, it's like detonating a 1 megaton bomb over every square mile of the planet. So blow up 100 million 1 megaton bombs all at once, spread out over the Earth. Yeah, that's a gamma ray burst from 100 light years away. And the hair on the back of my neck stood up. And I said, yeah, I'm glad I'm writing this book, because I'm getting no sleep for the next week. And see, so this stuff is honestly really scary. The good news is that there are no gamma ray burst progenitors that close. The nearest ones are 8,000 or 9,000 light years away, just on the edge of being close enough to do us damage. And those may not blow up as gamma ray bursts. We don't know. And if they do, we don't know if they're aimed at us. Because remember, this is a narrow little beam. If I aimed it right at you, you'd be okay. You might catch on fire, but you won't be vaporized. So, it's not so bad. And so the odds of one of these things hitting us is really low. Over 4 billion years, we've probably been hit by one. There may have been a nearby supernova 3 million years ago. There's some indications of that, but we're still here, right? You might read about a star passing through the solar system, but we're still here. At the end of every chapter, we're still here, except for when the sun turns into a red giant, and that won't be for 6 billion years. So the odds of you dying from that are 0. But your great to the 75th power grandchildren, yeah, they have to worry about that. And then at the eventual death of the universe, which was the single most depressing thing I've ever written. When you're talking about what happens a Google years from now, that was a little distressing. But again, at the end, I try to make this a little more upbeat, so I'm not scaring the crap out of people.